He is the voice of the Detroit Lions and sports director at WJBK Fox 2 Detroit. And Dan, this is we've not met in person, but this is the craziest thing I've ever done. I've been doing radio for my whole life, and I'm actually sitting here in a TV studio in West Bloomfield doing radio and TV with a bandana on my face. I mean, these are these are crazy times. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you think you've seen everything, and then you realize you haven't. And it's, I know the overused term is new normal, but we're all getting used to things that I don't think we'd ever have to deal with. But I think the probably if there's a silver lining here, it's that we've learned that, we have the ability to adapt and do things in a different way. And when challenged to continue to do our jobs, in this case, we can do it. So I think that's been kind of a cool thing to find out. I was just discussing that with some people in our department today. Just, it's beginning to feel normal conducting business this way.
Well, you've been broadcasting from home. I believe you are at home right now. How's all that going for you?
Yeah, I mean, I got sent home probably March 17th, I think. So I've been broadcasting from my house really since then. The challenge has been content, because the normal practices, the normal games, the normal things that we deal with aren't there for us. So we've had to be a little bit more creative. The NFL has certainly helped because they've stayed in business, and we've had a lot of NFL news to deal with. But it's been about, reaching out, talking to athletes, finding out what they're doing. A lot of people, what they're doing to help socially and help, first responders and people in need. So there've been a lot of good stories to deal with, but it's certainly probably the most creative we've ever had to get to fill our time when it comes to this period when we've all been working from home and had to use Zoom or some other method to get people in contact with them so we can find out what's going on.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time to join us on our MegaCast, as we're calling it, here across a bunch of Oakland County. It's good to talk to you. And I was not really surprised that the NFL draft saw the biggest audience in history. We're all pent up. We're just dying for anything that's new and fresh. And that was a very interesting draft. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think we were hungry for something. We didn't know the results going in. It's one thing to sit and watch, Game 7 of the '68 World Series when the Tigers are going to win, or some of these old Super Bowls they've been showing when we all know who's going to win. So most of it watching old sporting events. So I think we were all hungry for something where there was some intrigue and we could be surprised. And I think there was every chance in the world that could have been a technological nightmare, trying to do with the NFL, all the broadcast entities, all the players that were getting selected did. And to everybody's credit, it was incredible. I mean, the way that it came off was just such a credit to everybody that was involved with the planning. It was a beautiful broadcast. I think it was a feel-good broadcast in that there was so much family involved. And I think it was a feel-good 3 days at a time when we all needed to feel good about something. And I think it surprised even, I think, a lot of the people that were involved. Just listen to Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. Look, one of the, things about being an NFL head coach or general manager is you don't see your family very much. It's just a fact of life. These guys work a lot of hours. They're there past midnight and they're back at 6 a.m. if they go home at all. And I think these guys kind of found out, we can do this at home and we can still be effective. And that doesn't mean that's the way they'll do it from now on, but it's kind of what I said before. When challenged, we adapt. They adapted, and I think they enjoyed it. A lot of them had their kids in there helping with them. You saw dogs running around the place at Bill Belichick's place. No, I think it was really cool. It was well done, and I give credit to everybody that made it happen. And as you alluded to, it was something we all needed.
All right, Dan Miller, play-by-play voice of the Detroit Lions, and, of course, we see him on Fox 2 Detroit. Dan, I know you know how to cut to a station ID during your game, so forgive me for 30 seconds. This is WAHS in Auburn Hills, WBFH in Bloomfield Hills, and WBLD in West Bloomfield, Orchard Lake, and all of our other outlets on the MegaCast. So let's talk, Dan Miller, about what the Lions ended up with in the draft. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think the first-round pick was any surprise. Jeff Okudah had been linked to them for quite some time. He was best cornerback in the draft. So I think it probably would have been a mild surprise if it had been anybody but him. He probably, Derek Brown, Isaiah Simmons, one of those guys wouldn't have knocked you down. But I think Okudah was just the guy that made the most sense. It's a position of need. It is a premier position in this league if you get a guy who's a cover corner and can kind of cut off half the field for you. And it just, at number 3, it made the most sense for them. There's arguments about, trading. Well, there was nobody to trade with. There's argument about quarterback. They didn't want to draft a quarterback, and you got a coach and a general manager. They're kind of in a win now situation, so they didn't go in that direction. So, I think DeAndre Swift in the second round, a lot of people felt like that was a great value pick because he was expected to maybe go in the first round. He didn't. They had their pick of every running back on the board except for one who had been drafted in round 1. So, but Bob Quinn talked about that and said, when they looked at the board after the first round, that was the guy that jumped out at them. And as they went to sleep that night, they were just hoping that he would still be there after the 2 picks before them went. Julian Okwara in the third round is a guy that wouldn't have been there had he not gotten hurt last year. I think he was projected as a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick, but no way he's there in the third round if he didn't get hurt late in Notre Dame's season. So he says he's ready to go. If that's the case, there could be some real value there in getting him. They need somebody that can potentially do what he does. And let's keep in mind, when you're talking about these guys, all you're talking about is potential because you have to come into this league and prove that you can do it. But they really needed somebody that could come in from the edge, pressure the quarterback because that was really missing last year. They drafted 2 guards, get some competition in that room, let the best 2 guards figure it out and figure out which guys are going to be in that starting lineup. I think both these guys have a chance to start. Another running back. I was told by a coach a long time ago that when you get to the 6th and 7th, even the 5th round of a draft, you're drafting somebody who usually has one trait. They're guys that have holes, but you're looking for somebody that has one trait. Maybe it's speed, maybe it's great hands, maybe it's, an innate ability to just get a guy on the ground and tackle, something along those lines. And I think it's speed and versatility when it comes to Hundley. Then 2 defensive tackles late. Penasini is a big guy who theoretically could be a backup at defensive tackle and maybe a starter down the line. He's a run stopper. Can't have enough of those in this league, and a little more versatility in Cornell, the kid out of Ohio State. So, look, on paper, I've read all the reviews. People seem to like it. Seems to be a draft that checked a lot of the boxes that they needed to check. But the fact is you don't know for a while until you get these guys in here. In theory, it looks great, but ultimately these guys have to prove that they can play in this league.
Well, last year, we take a look at last year. Last year was really disappointing. We had high hopes for last year. Stafford gets injured. Team didn't play at all up to expectations. This year, you got some of those guys that can come back in the coming year and hopefully perform better. Hopefully Matt Stafford's going to be healthy. And then you've got all of these new draft picks. It's easy. I mean, we're always optimistic at this point in the year. But it's easy to look at this and say, we're going to be a lot better off than we were last year.
Yeah, and I'm generally optimistic about any team that I deal with and really probably across the league. I just kind of look and I try to figure what's the best case scenario. But I think what you touched on early there is the most important part. We get so caught up in what happens in March in free agency and April in the draft. The most important thing for a football team is who's already here. Most important thing for a football team is the core that you've already put together. The best teams draft players, put them in a system, and they continue to improve until you look up at one point and say, you know what? We've had enough draft picks. They've had enough time. They're pretty good, and now we're ready to roll. The biggest thing that can happen for this team is that Amani Oruwariye steps up, that Tracy Walker steps up and continues to ascend to look like he's a terrific player, that TJ Hawkinson continues to step up, Ragnow gets better, Decker continues to get better. All the guys that are here, Kerryon Johnson stays healthy, Deshaun Hand stays healthy. It's about the guys that are here. Look, free agents, it's been proven in this league, you don't win championships through free agency. You plug holes through free agency, and rookies struggle. So it's about the guys that are here being better, picking up their games and growing together. And I think that's going to tell the tale of what happens to the Lions in 2020.
Dan, do you think we're going to see football in 2020, and do you think fans are going to be able to be on site at Ford Field?
I only have an opinion. I have no fact, and I have no great information to lead me one way or the other. I do think we'll see football professionally at some point in the fall. I do think they will figure out a way to play. It's tough for me to envision right now 65,000 people. Maybe there's some sort of lottery system where they can just have people spread out through the stadium, but it's not full. Maybe there's no fans at all. I believe they'll figure out some way to play. And look, we're so dependent upon what happens throughout the rest of society. If we have a second wave and a big flare up, then everything else goes by the wayside.
Well, I think it was. I think we had really. I think we had a really tough time in the NBA. I think what shut the NBA down wasn't necessarily the fans, but it was the players, contracting the disease, and the players are played in such close proximity in football and basketball. How do you think the players are going to react to it? And I guess this is all speculation. I understand, but
no, it is, and there's been talk of restarting the NBA season by quarantining guys, and there's been talk of starting the Major League Baseball season by quarantining guys either in Arizona or Florida, and they'd have to go in there and basically do that hotel, stadium, hotel, stadium, hotel, stadium for 4.5 months to try to fit in a schedule or something like that. I think these are all things that you have to look at. Perhaps we get to a point where we do have, an abundance of testing where you can test guys every week and find out if there's an issue because, to your point, when Rudy Gobert got it, then all of a sudden other guys start having it. 4 members of the Brooklyn Nets have it. This thing can spread quickly because you're in close quarters and in a locker room and a clubhouse and places like that where there's really no escaping it. So I think all of it has to be looked at from fans to where the players go, because you can't just play a game and then they go back out in society and then come back and there's no system of checks. I think they're going to have to figure something like that out. It does appear that we're getting to a point where testing is going to get a little bit easier. We're having a hard time implementing it, probably is the clearest indication that we have of what's going on nationally. But I do think probably testing would have to be a part of any sort of return for professional sports. So I think you can apply a lot of what is going on within society, within everyday lives, and within a given state to what may or may not happen in sports. And let's not forget, if you have a team that is in a hotbed area for coronavirus outbreak, it's going to be very tough for them to separate professional sports and their people from what's going on outside that building. So I do think there's a lot of hurdles, but I also think that when you're talking about the kind of money that you're talking about and television contracts and things like that, they're going to do everything they can within reason to make it as safe as possible to play those games. Just a guess. We don't know. We'll find out.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that we'll be following the rest of society on this in football. I'm going to have to go back and look at this YouTube copy of this interview with Dan Miller with me wearing a bandana on my face. So you got to keep it all in perspective at these times. Dan, I've been a football fan my whole life. We get to do, Tyler and I have the pleasure of doing the West Bloomfield High School football games on the radio. We love football. We go to most of the Lions games, and it's tough. It's been tough over my lifetime to hang in there as a Lions fan, and I know there are a lot of Lions fans that it's kind of hard to keep a smile on your face. But then I was thinking about you driving over here today, and you just always seem to be happy. You seem to be very happy doing the games, very positive and upbeat. Does it ever get tough? I mean, if you don't mind sharing, Dan Miller, just between you and me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I think it starts with this. This is cliche. I'm living a dream. I was a kid who grew up just wanting to be involved in sports broadcasting. And then when I got old enough to kind of get a press pass and have a microphone, I would watch the play-by-play guys. And when I would watch them walk into the room, man, it was like they were walking on air. And it was just like, and then they would go into the booth. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I just, I was an 18, 19-year-old kid just saying, one day I want to be that guy that gets to walk into the booth and sit down and put a microphone on and call a game. So at its core, regardless of winning or losing, you realize that you're living a dream. It's an honor and a privilege to have the job. There's 32 people in the world that get to do what I do every week, which is calling NFL teams games on the radio. So that's where you start. Brandy and I, when we went through 0-16, we leaned on each other a lot because that was tough. But the one thing that we always said was, our mantra was, call the next play, because there's always a game happening in front of you, no matter how tough things get. It does get difficult sometimes because you ride the wave the fans ride with this team, and it can get frustrating. And we're no different than the players or the coaches or anybody else who feels it when you're not winning. It's difficult. But I would say the one thing I learned in 2008 was, as difficult as it might have been on Brandy or myself, I was working with coaches that are putting in 100 hours a week. I was working with players that were literally leaving their blood, sweat, and tears on the field. So whatever we were feeling, they were feeling it exponentially more than that, because that's how they defined themselves professionally. And it clearly wasn't going well. So yeah, I absolutely get down, and it's tough. And I've said to people before, the best part of my job, bar none, is when fans are happy. Just that feeling of walking into a gas station and seeing somebody and they're fired up and they tell you about it, or walking into Kroger or Bush's or whatever it is, and you walk in and they're just like, great game on Sunday, something like that. Because the opposite of it is that they tell you how hacked off they are, and that's not fun, but I get it, and it's part of the gig. But there's nothing better than when that team is winning, and the feeling of community within Detroit and the love for that team that is there. But I get the frustration as well. And the job they have is to figure out some way to get past all that, and let's start winning some games and have some fun.
Well, Dan Miller, just, you seem to keep it positive. We can hear in your voice every once in a while when Lions are having a bad day. We can hear it, but you always keep it positive. And you're in a market where, we love our pro athletes, but we love our play-by-play broadcasters too. You're in a market where I think, look at Ernie Harwell, for goodness sakes. He's probably one of the most revered people associated with the Tigers, and he never stepped foot on the field with a bat or a glove. So, this is a market where we do love our broadcasters too.
Well, I'm blessed to do what I do, and Ernie's obviously the king, and George with more than 40 years calling the Pistons, and I have such respect for Mark and the two Kens and Dan, and doing the Tigers and Shep and everybody, and it's like it's a great group. It's an extremely talented group to look at those guys and respect everything that they do. I appreciate what you're saying. I wouldn't put myself in the same ever sentence with those guys. Those guys earned it over a long time, and they're amazing. And I was, blessed to know Ernie, and he was very supportive of me, and just he sets the tone for other people, not just, and George as well. To be able to do 40 plus years, but it's not just that. It is that they are supportive of other people. They are happy when they see other people succeed, and they are the kind of people that keep pushing others up and saying, you can do this. And I had people like that in my past. And when I was struggling and wondering if it was going to work out, I had people that would say, you got this, just keep grinding. And I kind of learned from them that I try to do that for other people. So it's, everybody's kind of just trying to find their way, and sometimes you look to them for guidance, not by necessarily always what they say, that helps too, but how they conduct themselves, and you just keep moving forward, and they're great examples of that.
Dan Miller, thank you very much for your time today. Very charitable with your time, and we appreciate it. Good to talk to you. And, hey, look, we're looking forward to what is going to be a great Lions football season if we can get it in. We look forward to hearing your call, and go Lions. I think it was a good draft. Almost everyone I talked to, just fans, my friends, people I talked to here at work, they all thought we had a really good draft. So here's to a great Lions season and everyone's good health, and a big thank you for being with us and sharing some
Well
time
said.
today.
You will get, I appreciate it. You'll get no argument from me on any of those points. I appreciate you having me, and we'll look forward to, if they can give us some sense of normalcy down the line, that'd be a good thing.
Dan Miller, thank you very much. Dan Miller.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, take care, from Fox 2, and of course the play-by-play voice of the Detroit Lions, joining us right here on the MegaCast.